today is not only, like usual, a longtime customer and guest, he's also a dear friend and what I would call a mentor, a thought leader, and steward of our industry. And so Robert's humble, and I'm going to let him do his introduction because I know it'll be short and sweet and allow for us to cover a lot of ground. But we're really pleased to have him with us today, and I thank you for making the time for us, Robert.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. And I also want to thank Danielle and Janine and you for helping uh, get this going and get me prepared. Jeff, you've been such a important force in this industry. I can, think of only a couple of people that I've come across since I came to T&M in 1999, that have been more impactful on this industry than you. And this is just a great example of the kinds of contributions you've made to the industry. So I just want to thank you. You're an amazing guy and a dear friend and someone who I know. I've learned a lot from, whose advice I seek regularly, and I thank you. It's great to be here. I'm so excited. So many people have signed up.
Yep.
You know, uh,
You're very kind. Thank you.
let's get it going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please, Robert, just start us with your entry into the business, your
Sure.
background, and how that enabled you to maybe navigate future opportunities.
Yeah, so I was an assistant district attorney in Queens County here in New York City. And I was the DA's special assistant, and I knew lots and lots of cops, and they were all working off duty,
Mhm.
or a lot of them were. And I thought there was a better way to organize how they were doing that. Some guys were driving people, some guys were working in stores, some guys were doing security at the New York Stock Exchange. And there was a company led by a guy named Bob Trotta, and that's the T&M. It was Trotta and Malloy, two detectives from the NYPD, started a small company mainly to support the proprietary guard force at the New York Stock Exchange. And I bought John Malloy had already left the company. I bought that business from Bob Trotta in 1999. I
Mhm.
left the DA's office, and I'm still here.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we have a title for this and a lot to cover, and it's along the lines of executive protection. But I'd be remiss in not mentioning, as I hope you will, that you've actually charted a couple different courses, some domestic, some international. And so, if you could just take us through those product lines, how you
Sure.
got in and out of them, then we can dive deeper into some of the EP stuff that you're working on.
Sure. So T&M, when I came to the company, was a security guarding company. And as I said, our big client at that in 99 was the New York Stock Exchange. There was a canine bomb detection element there. And we then got into that business, and provided bomb dogs to lots of places, including the New York Stock Exchange ultimately. And I ultimately sold that part of our business to MSA, which has been sold again. Um, but but that was a wonderful business and a really interesting part of my growth. Um, we were the first company in the private company in the country to have vapor wake dogs, which are dogs that can actually smell explosives that when they're not being directed to do so. Um, Interestingly, when we were introduced to Vaporwake, and we went and bought our first Vaporwake dog and brought that to New York City, we were too early in the market for it.
Right, right.
Now, Vaporwake is sort of the standard, and it's penetrated all markets, both on the law enforcement side and in the private sector. Um, but you can actually be too early to the market with something like
Right,
that, and
right.
have very little interest in market penetration. Um, but that was a great business that morphed out of my our presence at the stock exchange. We bought a couple more security guarding companies, which took us away from the law enforcement personnel into the regular man guarding business. We grew that business, focused very intensively on New York City. Um, this was all post 9/11, and the city had changed, people's mindset around security and security guarding changed, so we needed to be in both the armed and unarmed aspects of the business, and we were. And then we had a client come to us and ask us, to to upgrade our executive protection, skills. And I was fortunate enough to meet Joe Russo, who led our executive protection business for 20 years and is still a key part of of my advisory team. Um, and then a colleague of mine who was the special narcotics prosecutor for the city of New York was running a sophisticated investigations business. We bought that business. Bob Silverine came on board with T&M, and we grew an investigative practice together. At some point, in 2013, I sold our guarding business, our man guarding business, but we stayed in the investigation, security consulting, and executive protection business, and that's where we are today.
Got it. Got it. So this is a chicken or egg question, but I think by your definition and your background, you've answered some of it. So, do you look for the service to fit the customer or the customer to fit the service? You mentioned Joe Russo. It's not surprising to me that Joe and people like Jack Goldsboro and others that you have recruited to your organization for very specific purposes,
Yeah.
and have done so very successfully. Do you try to go find out where the demand is first, or do you look for great talent and say, "I got a place I think I can put you"?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. I mean, you mentioned Jack, and Jack Goldsboro's just an icon and a legend in our business. I was so fortunate to work with him and to learn from him. And I mean, very little of what I accomplished didn't happen because Jack was behind me, and he deserves a ton of credit for the success of TNM and for my success. You know, in the instance of executive protection, bringing Joe on and having a client that was going to support the cost of that
Right,
was 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 a wonderful opportunity for a young Robert Tucker,
right,
because there was such a significant upgrade in the quality of our service when we went from grabbing uh, NYPD guys and asking them to do executive protection to having an experienced special agent in charge from the Secret Service who ran the Clinton division, retire on a Friday, come to us on a Monday, and start and essentially stand up
right,
the executive protection division of TNM in a completely different way, with a
right,
completely different training set, with a completely different mindset. And so in that instance, we hired someone and for a client and then built a business around that. Many times over the last, nearly 3 decades, someone has walked in and I said, I gotta have that guy's got to work for TNM.
right.
And it happened last week, actually. It's still
Mhm.
happening. Where you just too good to let out of the office. And so we've got this great luxury to be able to say yes quickly.
Mhm.
I own the business. We don't have to go to a board. We don't have to, we
Right,
don't have a
right,
lot of red tape. So in that instance, if you build it, it'll come.
right, right. And so, having said that, we were on a planning session last week, and I asked you to push the camera towards Park Avenue, which is where your office is. How did the UN assembly go last week? And any surprises, or
Yeah,
is
that's
everything
a
go well?
yeah, that's about the busiest week of our year because of events that we participate on the security side in, and there's a group of dignitaries that come to New York both from the private sector corporate world and from governments who don't get security from the State Department or the Secret Service, but still require it or have it in their own country. And
Right.
so we get hired by consulates and embassies to support those people while they're here. I think it went really well. It was back to very much over 150 heads of state in New York. The president was here for almost of the United States was here for almost 3 days. You know what that does to New York. The traffic was difficult. It really was, and the weather wasn't great. And but no, from a pure security standpoint, I think it went great. I mean, I think there were some typical predictable minor incidents, but nothing at all newsworthy or noteworthy. Really, really great job by all the, and that's New York. We've got this incredible law enforcement community here, headed by the NYPD, but the partnerships with all the federal agencies and other the New York State Police and other police agencies, it's incredible. Everyone is involved, Jeff, in making UNGA safe, including private security.
Right, right. It's a good segue, and I know I jump all around. My ADHD goes into full bloom when I'm speaking on this platform. So New York City, right? One of the cities like San Francisco and Chicago, et cetera, where there's tremendous pressure and crime and other things that go with it, and it's become a political hotbed. And one could argue going into 2024, an election year, probably going to get worse before it gets better. When you add, of course, immigration, it becomes a powder keg. Can you give us a good feel both on two fronts? One, the current mayor, and I'm not asking you to evaluate him specifically, I'm just talking about methodologies, things that might have been different from prior administrations. What are you seeing that's positive? What are you seeing that's going to require more rigor? And how can private security perhaps participate in that?
Yeah. You know, First of all, I think there's a great role for private security, and it's already happening. I think Allied has a contract, and some other security companies have a contract with the City of New York and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, our subway system. There are Allied guards now at turnstiles. I think that's having an impact. Look, I think Mayor Adams is the right guy at the right time. I think it's his police background is really relevant. I think this is a huge job, and it's a tremendously challenging job for anyone, for a Mike
Right,
Bloomberg, for anyone. And you get the hand you're dealt.
right,
And so look, there are challenges here in New York City. And I think the street disorder has been a big challenge, and working with the five district attorneys in New York has been more challenging than when I was an assistant district attorney
right.
here in New York. But I think that there's a plan, and I think that they're executing on it. And subway crime is way down. Um, Deployments in the subway of cops is way up. As I said, there's now a private security element in the subway system, which I think is having an effect on people's propensity to jump the turnstiles.
Right.
Um, there was a lot of press last week about a new robot that will patrol in the Times Square subway station, sending video back. It's I don't again I think if it gives good video, then that's going to help in crime investigations.
Mhm.
Um, I think look, don't ever count New York City out. I think New York City is doing well. I think there are pockets of crime in certain areas that are being addressed by the NYPD. I think I love the leadership team in the NYPD right now. Um, I think those guys know what they're doing,
Mhm.
and I think that the more the police department works with the prosecutors' offices, both at the state and federal level, I think I think things will return to a safer New York City. But I think it's significantly better now than it was even a year ago.
Robert, you're like a lot of our guests, too many to mention now, that have really committed themselves not only to their companies and their employees and their families, but also to the industry. And one of the ways in which you've done that, whether that be with Albanese or other associations, has an absolute direct correlation to your public-private relationship. Tell us a little bit about how one would engage in that. I'm in Tuscaloosa, I'm in Nashville, pick a city wherever you'd like, Madison. How does one engage in a public-private discussion, dialogue of relevance? And then what is it that could be an outcome, possible outcomes?
Yeah. Look, I love cops and firefighters and people who deliver emergency services to New York City. I always have. I was a little kid with a scanner on a bicycle riding around New York City. And so I support those organizations through their philanthropy arms. The NYPD has a foundation, the FDNY has a foundation. I'm on both boards. I'm very active on both boards, executive committee. I think you can run a business like T&M and still be civically involved in what's going on in your city. Look, my business is located, as you said, right here on Park Avenue in New York City, right in the heart of Main and Main. And so if my business is completely impacted every day by the things that the fire department and the police department are doing. I feel like it's almost an obligation. It's not just because of my
Right.
passion and love for the cops and firefighters, but it's an obligation for the corporate community, especially the security industry, to be hand in glove with those public service organizations
Mhm.
like fire, like police, but broader than that,
Right.
to make sure that what we're doing in guarding a building is 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 really working for the fire department when an alarm in the building goes off,
Right.
or for a crime in progress or an EMS ambulance response. Can they get up in the elevators? Do the stretchers fit in the elevator? There's
Right.
so many things you need to think about. We're thinking about that at the security manned guarding level, but
Right.
we're also just working very closely with the cops and firefighters here in New York. And I think everyone should be doing that that's running a security company.
Robert, you mentioned being early in an industry. So I'll ask you, put your executive protection hat on, and I'm sitting here and I really want to get in that business. And I've contacted some local organizations that can help me recruit, just let's say that. Are there certain pockets of industries, finance, sports, entertainment, etc., that lend themselves to an automatic where you're not having to teach people why they need it and the demand is already there?
Yeah. I mean, I think yes is the answer to your question. Again, I don't think I have my finger right on the pulse of that. What I would say is we've been super successful on the executive protection side because we've been able to recruit, train, and deploy the right people to the right seats on the right bus. And so I, without offending anyone, not every cop can do executive protection.
Right.
And so the notion that you did 20 or 25 years or 30 years in law enforcement, you can come out and be an EP agent for a CEO, that's just wrong.
Right.
And it doesn't work. And
Right.
it's actually why Joe Russo added so much value to TNM when he came here, and why all of the management team in our executive protection division, many of whom are cops, and many of whom were not in executive protection assignments when they were in the NYPD, but they are aware that there are new skills that they need to learn post policing
Right.
that will make them better at that job. I mean, it's silly things like just training. I think about a cop who's not trained well, who pulls a car up, and when the passenger goes to open it, there's a hydrant or a tree or something. Not aware of that. Little silly things like that to much broader things about advanced work and logistics and emergency evacuation and all of the more sophisticated elements of EP. But the answer is, look, there are all of the industries you mentioned
Mhm.
are users of our service,
Right.
and we work in all those industries.
Right.
Um, and we work for people whose boards of directors demand that they have that service as part of um, their job,
Hmm.
and we work for people who appreciate the value proposition of having someone with them who's trained with a set of skills that are not just for safety and security, but are for comfort as well, because that's
Right,
a big part of it.
right, right. Robert, a lot of our customers in the last couple of years has started to make the pivot into technology, video monitoring, access control, the likes. Yours was the first GSOC I had ever seen. I didn't even know what it was. I was embarrassed to ask what a GSOC was. And you politely brought me in and gave me a demonstration. And again, we're talking about the early 2000s. So tell me, what kinds of recommendations, if any, would you make today if you were starting out new and saying, "Hey, I really need a command center. It's important life center, brain trust of my organization." What would you do?
Well, look, I mean, the first thing I would say is that technology is here and it's here to stay, and it's getting more sophisticated every single day. And if anybody went to GSX or goes to ASIS, those are as much tech conferences as any conference now
Right,
is. um and you got to embrace it. You can't run from it, you can't hide from it. It's a part of man. Technology is a part of manned guarding. I mean, I can remember the DTEX clock
yes, yes,
with the paper.
yeah,
So
right,
but it's we've come a long way from there, and rightfully so. In terms of GSOC, look, we were early adopters of having a room in our office with someone sitting there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, who kept tabs on our operations. That's what our GSOC did then, and in many ways, it's what it does now. Now, the amount of information we're gathering
right,
today is just so much more
right,
than what we were processing and gathering. But at the core, we want to know where our executive protection teams are. We want to be able to understand the what's going on where they are.
right,
We want to get critical information to them right away. So if you're at the UN and you're heading to Teterboro Airport, you have two choices. You can go over the George Washington Bridge, or you can go through the tunnel. And if you choose to go through the Lincoln Tunnel, but it's closed because there's an accident in it, you're not getting to Teterboro Airport on time.
right,
We in our GSOC foundationally we'll know that, and we'll say, hey, go to the GW, don't take the tunnel.
right,
To the client, they don't know. They're too busy on their
right,
phones talking. They don't know, but we saved 2 hours
right,
of their time. And EP is about time saving. It
right,
really is. I've seen bad EP where the principal's looking for the bathroom and he walks himself into a broom closet.
right,
Like
right,
it's just time. It's also embarrassment. It's other things, but so situational awareness in our GSOC has always been what we set it up for.
mhm,
Today, it's able to do lots of other things, gather lots of information, push relevant information out to our teams. But again, I think technology is a huge part of what we do now, but the human element is also not going away. You
right,
are not going to have a GSOC that has nobody in it.
right,
You
right,
know, it's
right,
it's always, and who you sit in there, and how you pick that person, and how you train them, and what their reaction time is to different scenarios. That's the difference in a good GSOC and a great GSOC.
Robert, it's a 24 by 7, 365 business. Again, ran into you one time coming out of a building or in a building. It was not an appointment. It was 3:14. And you said, "Jeff, I apologize. Call me later today. I got to take this call." It was actually a standing call that you had with your daughter or daughters at the time. I'm not sure how many at the time. But tell me a little bit about how you manage your time and what that's like. Because for lots of people, it's a huge challenge.
Yeah. Look, I take being a dad very seriously. I have 3 children. They're a little older now. Um, but it's by far my most important job, and one that I make time for. I do have a busy work life with lots going on and lots of commitments to extracurricular activities, but I always want to hear from my children, and I try as hard as I can to get to their games and their activities.
Yeah.
And if I can't, then today technology allows you to stream soccer games that your kids are playing in,
Right.
and so I will have it on a laptop on my desk while I'm working, and I'll jump out of my chair and cheer when one, like people are like, "What the Robert's gone nuts in his office." Um, but being a dad and being a parent is something you decide to do, and like all the things that I decide to do, you've got to be all in. And I am all in for my children. So, and I'm all in for lots of people's children. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I think it's you know, people were all in for me,
Right.
and I'm about paying it forward. But as it relates to my kids, the only advice I'd give to people that are watching is make the time, because the old adage "it goes quickly" is true, and you give your kids their wings, and ultimately you want them to fly on their own, and when they do, you're sort of very proud. But the dividends you're getting back, or that I get back, are amazing. I just again, I'm very proud of TNM, but I'm a whole lot more proud of my kids.
Well, it's this is leading somewhere, but I'd be remiss not to tell this story because it's one of our best interactions. I walked in your office. It was, I don't remember the year, but you had asked us why, if we were in possession of this employee data, both from a payroll and billing perspective, why you couldn't leverage that in a badging system. You were just perplexed. It seemed like such a natural. And you let me and another associate come and present, and you were in the other end of the conference room, and we had not known each other that long, that well, and you let us get in about 4 to 6 minutes, and you politely paused, and you said, guys, yeah, this is terrible. This is just what the hell are you doing? Why do you have to upload, download, then badge, or etc.? And I'm laughing to that because I left that meeting thinking to myself, I guess I have to find more customers that'll be brutally honest with me so we can get to a path really quick. And so
Well, yeah.
that files into mentorship. And I want you to expound upon that a little bit, because you've been very available to me, and I know many others. As much as I cherish our friendship, I know there are others that hold you most dear because of your empathy and compassion for people. But Gen Zs get lots of knocks, not a lot of knocks. I think your kids fall into that category. It's double-sided question. Any aspirations for any of your kids to join the business? Because we have lots of customers that have family legacy. And then two is, do you have any mentorship, either formal or informal programs that allow for young interns or et cetera, to learn the security industry?
So first of all, I love when you remind me of that story. I cannot believe my behavior. I'm so embarrassed. But it was a terrible presentation.
Yes, it was horrible. It
It
was
was
horrible.
terrible. And
Duly
and
noted.
but I can't believe I said that. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm
you did.
mortified. But anyway, sometimes my brutal honesty is too much. And I think in my old age now, I have gotten it under control,
Yes.
where I just temper it, and I just should rightfully bite my tongue, and I do. Um, as it relates to mentoring, look, one of the great things about technology coming into the security industry the way it has is it's opened a path for young people to have a career in our investigative business. See, when we started with Bob Silbering back in the mid 2000s, it was a lot of retired FBI agents and cops, detectives, and there was not a lot of room for young people.
Right.
Today, down the hall in our investigative business, it's filled with young people who are doing social media monitoring, who are doing deep dive background checks, lit support, and they're supervised by my colleagues who were assistant DAs, and who were our retired agents of the federal government, and the like. Um, but there's room in our businesses now for the mid 20s people
Right.
And it's wonderful because they're so super smart, they're so energized, and frankly, you know, I got a new iPhone today. I have no idea how to get my watch working with the iPhone. I mean, the whole thing. But there's a guy down the hall who's in his mid 20s, and this was like the easiest thing in the world for him.
Right.
And so there's but that's a joke. But the truth is that in terms of database research, dark web research, social media monitoring, web clearing, some of the things that we do at TNM, these young people are adding tremendous, tremendous value. As for my kids, look, I hope that they forge their own path and that they don't want to come into this business. There's no reason for them to. This is a wonderful business. As you know, I built a business with a partner or partners in Israel. That's large. My partner who operates that business in Israel has children. They're not in the business. They have an experience set from the Israeli Defense Forces that would allow them to come into our business.
Mhm.
They have chosen to forge their own path. Um, I would like my kids to forge their own path.
Right.
You know, I don't see them coming into my business, but I have nothing against those moms and dads who have built security businesses who bring in the next generation. Wonderful, lucky.
Right.
How much of a greater thing could there be than working with your kid? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
but I don't see it for me. But I think if you can set that path early and you can make that happen, you're lucky and your clients are lucky. But
Right.
I would caution that not every child is is as good as their parent at running the security business. So
Right.
it's not an automatic. It's got to be very authentic, very natural, and not forced.
Right, right. That's a good example. Robin, you mentioned Israel, and I know that you've got a very big investment there and a very big force, human capital. Tell us a little bit about how you got into it, and there are any shared experiences that you're leveraging across the T&M portfolio?
Yeah. So the TNM USA and TNM Israel are separate businesses.
Yes.
They have the same name, but they are not affiliated businesses. And what I would say is that um, well, TNM Israel has gotten very large. We have almost 16,000 employees there. We're the largest security services, and facilities management business in the country. Um, I'm the non-executive chairman of that business. I go over there a lot. I rely heavily on our CEO and my partner there, who has helped me roll up uh, that industry in Israel, not unlike what Steve Jones has done here in the United States. We've built a large business. There's a lot of complementary services between building facilities management, janitorial, and the like, and security services in buildings and at malls and et cetera. Um, I have learned a lot from them. That we're 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 really the technology end of what's going on in Israel has been way ahead of what's going on here for a long time. It's slowed down, and I think like everything, people are catching up in the race.
Right. Right.
But but we have a sophisticated joint venture with on the cybersecurity side. The things that are going on in cyber over there are really sophisticated and advanced. I brought some of that back here,
Mhm.
um, and even just technique in executive protection. I've watched how the Israelis do executive protection post the assassination of their prime minister. They've learned a lot from the U.S. Secret Service. I think the U.S. Secret Service learns from them from time to time. They tend to be aggressive
Right.
um, in all facets
Right.
of
Right.
what they do.
Right.
But it's a wonderful, wonderful investment that I have made as a Jew but also as a security executive, it if I always say if you can like the song, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere in New York City, for sure. I think that's there's some truth to that. If
Right.
you can make it in Jerusalem, you can make it anywhere.
Tough spot, right?
Tough
Yeah,
spot. Yeah,
100%, 100%.
tough spot.
Robert, if you were thinking about a business that you're not in today, under the big S security, something that you thought about, or maybe it's not here yet. And again, like I said, you've been early to some businesses. You've done some really special work in sexual harassment and de-escalation. You've really hired great people and deployed some wonderful programs for clients, many in the financial world and others. Any businesses that are catching your fancy now, where you look and say, "Wow, tonight before I go to bed, I'm going to read that story, or I'm going to go try to recruit this person, or I'm going to go to this country because I want to learn more about it."
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I do try to read about the successes other people are having. There are a lot of super successful people in our space that I know and that I don't
Right.
know. I think we at TNM, if we were going to build something from scratch, would would benefit from getting more sophisticated in the cyber world.
Mhm.
Uh, Cybersecurity. I used to say, and this is sort of naive. There's only two places you can be. You're either hacked or you're hacked and you don't know it.
Right.
And I do think though, while I think that's true, I think there are things that you can do now uh, proactively to protect your network, to protect the the IP and other information that we store. And we spend a lot of time at TNM thinking about how to protect the data that we have here, and we spend a lot of money on it. We have a lot of outside partners helping us. Um, we have our CSOC in Israel monitoring certain aspects of our network using very sophisticated technology that's available. Um, I think that if I had a lot more time, I would get deeper into the tech side of the business, um, especially as it relates to cybersecurity.
I would imagine that AI will help escalate and accelerate those business interests because
Yeah,
it
I'm
seems
not a
inevitable.
I'm not afraid of AI. I mean, there's this whole sort of people. I think there are going to be some really wonderful outcomes because of AI. Again, you've got to protect yourself and your business and your clients from ruthless people who want to do you harm. And and obviously AI can be used in a nefarious way,
Right.
but but overall, I think it will add tremendous value. More so, AI is not new. You know this because
Yes.
there was Watson and
Yeah.
things like that, and so this is obviously it's new to sort of the vocab of
Yes.
the general public, but this is not new. This
No.
is something that's emerging into the public market in a way like when you went from film to digital.
Right.
Digital capturing of images was not new then.
Right.
It was just new to the retail market
Right.
and more accessible. AI is just becoming more accessible with Chat GPT and other platforms, but it's not new. And so I think that you can either fear it and run away from it, or you can lean into it and adopt it and figure out how it can help you and your business. And I take the latter approach.
Robert, we're viscerally tied to negative stimuli, right? We're cavemen, so we're actually built to protect ourselves, and which is why negative campaigning works. Everyone says, "Well, why do they do that?" Well, because it works, right? It just moves. That's how we're wired, hardwired. So, you've had seminal moments in your career with massive impact, 9/11 just being one of them, the 2008 financial crisis, etc. Part of the social media world is building this sense of urgency, right? Chicken Little, the sky's falling. How do you mentally prepare your customers or potential customers or employees for future events similar to ones that you've experienced without being the guy that's saying, oh no?
Yeah.
Because we don't know enough, right? Urgency, urgency, urgency means no urgency. So I'm always curious from a security practitioner standpoint, given how biologically we're wired and your literal experience with two massive events, one worse than the other for different reasons, obviously. How do you do that? What is it from a customer perspective that you can share with them?
Yeah, look, you're right. I mean, I started a business in 90, came to a business in 99 that was really just a startup, and then I was downtown for September 11th. Our office was right there. It was shut. There was no power. You know, we had to make a payroll, and luckily for us, we had Valiant. We were able to just mirror the payroll from the week before, which we just wanted to get money in our guys' hands. Um, you know, I've been through a lot. We as New Yorkers have been through a lot.
Yep.
I think I think if I think about it, I think one of the things I do is just stay calm and impart that to our clients. Like, clients call with their hair on fire about things that just don't warrant that. You
Right.
know, we've been through blackouts and terrible storms and terrorist attacks and things that warrant serious hair on fire moments.
Right.
I think I do have a real good sense of perspective today, um, about things like what you're talking about. But I think other people do too, Jeff. I'm not finding people, you know, terrible overreactions I used to get. I think clients are as smart as me, if not, and usually smarter. And I learn more from them than I have to impart on them. But I try to keep calm and I have a sense of confidence. I have a sense of confidence in my team that when you call us,
Right.
we're going to be able. We are problem solvers at the core,
Right.
and we will solve your problem. So calm down, tell me what's going on, and let me try to fix it.
Yeah, yeah. Preemptively, that's always, and we have lots of practitioners, meaning our customers on the line today as we share this with them, and many will download the presentation as well. But I always wonder from their perspective, right? They've got a board, they've got a boss, and Robert and 12 other people come in during the course of a year and try to educate them on the fact that there's something else coming and how are you prepared for it? Because after all, that's what we're talking about: risk mitigation, situational awareness, right? That's your job. That's what you're
Yeah.
supposed to impart to your
I
customer.
listen, our security consulting division here spends a lot of time with customers talking about
Right.
that and tabletopping and working through scenarios and red teaming and doing all of the things that T&M does for clients to get them ready for the real event.
Right.
And because it's not if, it's when.
Right.
And we all know that. And that's not a scare tactic.
No.
I'm way out of the business of getting people all amped up and scared
Yeah.
about things. But I do think we've got to be realistic and understand that there's a business continuity element of what we do. There's a preparedness element of what we do. And because we've lived through these things, because we were there for them, because we were at our client's side during them, we are just better prepared to impart that wisdom
Right.
than 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 some people who weren't. And so if you weren't in the middle of 9/11 like I was, you can't possibly. I'm just better prepared to talk to you about it because I was there. I was at
Right.
the stock. I happened to have been at the stock exchange at the time when this happened. And so, and then silly, I walked over there to see what was going on. So I was in the middle of the chaos. That's a horrible, horrible day that I don't like to talk about. But the truth is, because I was there, I know what it looks like, I know what it smells like, I know what it feels like, I know what people's reactions are to it, and I remember it like it was yesterday.
Right.
But that's the same with hurricanes and blackouts and other things that I've talked about where I was there for it. I remember, the chaos around the calendar going from 99 to 2000.
Right.
And I remember I was sitting at the New York Stock Exchange, at 11:59 going, oh my
Right.
God,
Right.
here it
Right.
comes,
Right.
here it comes,
Right.
click.
Nothing.
And there we were, nothing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, and were there some issues? Of course there are issues. But
Right.
again, in the scheme of things, the world didn't collapse.
It's a really good example. In a word, it's called experience, and it's hard to impart that on people, right?
Yeah.
Janine's going to be so proud. I'm going to go a minute early to the questions because there are many. So I think I might get a little star on my helmet when the day is done. So I'm going to take a moment here. Can you share notable changes you faced providing services and how you overcame them? Um, so I think we talked about that, some challenges, right? Whether that be from 9/11 or the 2008 crisis
Look,
or
but we,
1999.
we talked about, Jeff,
Yep.
we talked about things like storms and terrorist attacks. Don't forget, my biggest client was Lehman Brothers.
Right.
And so I've lived through that too, where by no fault of a guard of mine,
Right.
by no, all of a sudden my biggest client was out of business.
Right.
And look, the pandemic, I mean, could you, if you had sort of put up on a whiteboard, let me tell you what's going to happen
Right.
in March of, like, what?
Right.
The whole world's going to shut down?
Right.
We had to pivot with no sports, no entertainment, no business travel. We had to pivot our entire business into something different than it was the day before, the week before,
Right.
in order to stay in business. And I had to coach and boost the morale of a lot of people, including me, who
Right.
were scared, whose family was getting sick, who there was no vaccine. It was a scary time. We have really, I'm so fortunate to, when you peel this onion back and you talk about these things, to have lived through all of this stuff is pretty, yeah, it does give you a good set of experiences to be able to impart, hopefully for a long time, on the next generation.
Yeah, that's I didn't realize as you were starting to say them and starting to add them up. I was like, yeah, there was the blackout, there was Sandy. Oh, right, COVID. That's right. I would like to try to forget that one, although I just had it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, Robert, if you were telling and speaking to a group of man guarding owners today, and you said to them, there's only one technology you can choose. In other words, for 2024, I wanted you to invest your time in this, whether it's access control, the drones or robots, etc. What one would you pick off the top of the hat and say, and it could be body cams, I don't care what it is, what would you pick?
Well, look, from my experience, and I'm again, I was out of the man guarding business essentially in 2013, but this is shameless, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's
Yeah,
true. The best decision I made was adopting Valiant very early, that integrated payroll, scheduling, and billing, because we were getting busier and busier just organically before we had it, and it was all on paper. And
right,
we were writing things down and handing them to this woman Judy in our office, and we would hope that she could read our chicken scratch, and that we would get it into some payroll system so the guys would get paid, and then we would hope that based on the payroll we could get the billing right. And
right,
it was just, the whole thing was just a hope and a
mhm,
prayer.
right,
And I don't remember the name of that young woman who came into the office from Valiant and sold us Valiant for the very first time. But that, and I remember getting a lot of pushback from people like, you don't need this. You're not big enough.
right,
You don't need such a sophisticated system at the time. This was like 90 2000, 99
yep,
2000.
Yep.
And that was the single best decision I made, because for a lot of reasons. One, we stopped making a lot of billing errors, which were frustrating to customers. We paid our people properly. You tied the payroll to the billing very easily, and the hours that everybody worked. So you there was something very, a path you could follow
Right.
that made perfect sense. And of course, it allowed us to grow very, very fast, starting on September 12th, 2001,
Right.
where we had this stable of off-duty and retired cops, and everybody in New York City wanted them the
Right.
next day.
Right.
And we were able to start to push people around to different new customers, put them in the system very fast, put posts in the system very fast, and get people paid. So if you don't have something like that yet, which I hope everybody on this call does,
Right.
if you're sophisticated enough to go on Zoom, you should have that. But if you don't have something like that, that's tying that all together and making that aspect of your business really simple, then that would be the most important decision you could make.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes, I appreciate that. Self-serving, but I appreciate it. Um, Robert, if you were going out today, which you do every day, because people now come to you because of the excellence that your company has stood for and the kinds of alumni that you have. And I found this to be true in a lot of our customers, especially those at the government contracting space that have connections at Quantico and other places for recruiting. But how does one get involved or get to those organizations to find out who's retiring? Are there seminars they can go to? Are there events that they can attend as non-participants to help recruiting? Because I really do view that. You know, you got your hands dirty early and learned it from the precinct side up. So you're pretty much wired all the way through the vertical
Yeah.
connectedness. But how about the ones that don't?
Well, look, I think, there are so many platforms today that give you access to people you never really did have access to. You'd have to you'd have to graduate from the FBI Academy in order to have the book of retired agents,
Right.
in order to,
Right.
today, you can just put an ad in Side Gig or something like that, and get lots of police, federal agents looking at it.
Right.
And so I think it's a lot easier today to recruit the kind of people we recruit
Right.
than it ever has been, even with the connectivity that I admittedly have. Um, we like at T&M to bring on people who know people here.
Right. Right.
There's nothing better than a personal recommendation from someone you know and trust.
Totally.
And so, but I think again, the internet has opened this up so that if I have no business in the Midwest, for example, except executive protection. But if I was going to stand up a guarding company in the Midwest, I would know how to recruit those people,
Right.
because I could access them in a way, because everybody's using, Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and platforms where companies like ours and others, it happens not like ours, but others are recruiting all the time. So, we're I like to say we're boutique big,
Right.
is a term I like to
Right.
say. So we use some of the old fashioned recruiting methodologies still,
Mhm.
but we're big and can operate all over the world like we do.
Right. Robert, we got a couple minutes left. And so one of the things that always fascinates me is this combination between, right, the experience that you have and how some of that gets converted into software. So, for instance, I was at Fisherman's Wharf Marriott, which is one of their largest properties. We're meeting with the general manager, trying to automate some of their parking and some of their catering folks. And one of the gentlemen came out as the general manager and he said, "We got a wedding on Saturday, 311 people." And he started to spew out, "I need 22 left-handed servers. I need, we can park X amount of cars per minute." So I asked him, I said, "Oh, where do you keep that information? Where's the software that allows for you to do this predictive analytics?" He goes, "Where is it?" It's right here. It's right here. So have you seen Are there some more predictive security related softwares? And again, not giving the ingredients to the cake away that allows for you to leverage some of this? Are there systems that now do a lot of that?
I mean, we're developing some of that ourselves internally.
Right,
We have a big roster of people that have worked and work currently for TNM. As a result, we poll them about skills that they have. Are you a polygraph expert? Do you speak Spanish? Do you
right,
speak, do you have a truck driving license?
right,
What special skills do you bring to T&M aside from the skill that we hired you for?
right, right,
We're developing that because we get presented all the time with challenging problems from law firms and from private clients and companies, and very often the answer to their challenge lies in the people that I have or
right,
have had working for me. So
right.
we pick up the phone and call someone who doesn't even work here anymore and say, "Hey,
Got it.
you seem to have this." So we're tracking more information about our people today
Right,
than ever. You used to take their driver's license and their social security number, date of birth, and address
right,
to pay them.
right,
You know,
right,
now we've turned the whole thing around where we pay them, but we also gather lots of information about them so we can make ourselves bigger and be a force multiplier because of the skills they have. There are people who are pistol, marksmen.
yep,
There are people who are gunsmiths. There's so many with HR 218 now. There are instructors who are qualified to give that course, but they're working security for us.
right, right,
But their day job is that. Well, we need that.
right,
I need to know that about you.
right.
And so now we're tracking that, and we're doing a real good job with that. We have again, you talk about young people getting into this business. We have a young woman working for us that has put that database together for us. Game changing, game
Awesome.
changing. Yeah,
Robert, we're up against it. I just can't thank you enough for your generosity and for your friendship. This has been hugely important for our customer base, for our attendees, and for enriching what we've built in a platform that was created for the acquisition we made from Chris Anderson at Silvertrack. But we've really now, and you've just added to it, have let these building blocks that people that want to be in this business rub up against and be like, wow, I've learned a lot from this. So I want to thank you as both your friend and past customer and hopefully future customer and always a friend.
yeah.
And again, to our marketing folks, again, Danielle and Janine, thank you guys very, very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Really fun. I appreciate you inviting me.
Have a great day and we'll talk soon. Thanks.